came in sort of from earlier today, just one by one. And first of all, can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, very good. So the first question, this was from about 11:16 this morning. What was the English language word Ajahn mentioned yesterday? Little used, but it would be nice for it to be used more. So that word was synderesis, synderesis, synderesis. So it's a bit of an obscure term. It's found in academic philosophy, moral philosophy, apparently first sort of tracked down in writing in the writings of Saint Jerome way back when, and it means the love of the good. That it is translated in various ways or rendered in various ways, but that's the how I understand it. And there isn't really another English word that I know of that expresses that. So and I feel that's a very important quality to see. That's the in a way the root of our humanity. When you define the 6 realms of existence in the Buddhist cosmology, what defines the human realm, the manusa loka, is living virtuously. That's what defines us as humanity. So you can have a human body but not actually be living in the human realm, which might be a bit frightening to some of you. But that's the defining principle of the manusa loka, is that moral sensitivity, or that love of the good. And so the word synderesis represents that, as far as I'm aware. So that's why I've been using it recently, and I'd like to probably vainly, it's a vain hope, to get that included into the Buddhist lexicon of useful terms to refer to. So next question. This was from about 12 minutes past 1 earlier this afternoon. It's very difficult to hold in loving kindness what is happening here in India. The deaths of so many friends and their families. The lived experience of seeing how so many deaths could have been avoided. Seeing the apathy of authorities. My own neighbor who refuses to wear a mask. It's very difficult to see all this as it is what it is. How do I honor the experiencing of pain and also be able to hold compassion in my heart? That's a very good question. I mean, at the moment, things are really in a tragic state in India. As most people are probably aware, the number of cases, infections and deaths per day there is extraordinarily high, and very painful and challenging situation. Similarly, in the United States, I know there's a few people joining in this weekend from the USA. The sort of rampant spread of the pandemic, and I would suggest the incredible apathy and incompetence of the authorities in doing anything appropriate to help stem that tide, so that the number of deaths in the USA is hundreds of thousands of people have died there, far more than in wars in the last couple of hundred years. And so that it's and many other countries around the world. So one of the things I like to emphasize is that when we use terms like "this is the way it is" or "it's like this," it can come across as a kind of passivity, sort of "this is the way it is, therefore get over it," or "switch off," or "there's nothing to be done," but I think that's a radical misunderstanding of the teaching. Sometimes, to be honest, there are meditation teachings and Buddhist teachers who speak in that way when they talk about non-attachment or just being the observer or letting go, when what they do, they mean, they deliberately mean not acting and kind of switching off capacity to engage or to do, and that so that say in a meditation period it might say, don't if you have a feeling of pain, don't move, just watch it, don't do anything with that, just watch. So the instruction really is like freeze. And I would say that's not just watching, that's an active sort of in a way an active move towards aversion and or at least a desire to get rid of a kind of annihilationism, because we're naturally responsive. We are attuned to the living system. We're part of the living system. Our capacity to act is part of the way things are. So when somebody says just watch and sort of don't, quote unquote, don't do anything, to me that's kind of going against the intrinsic attunement of this living system to the living system that it's a part of. And so just as your heart and your liver are related, your lungs and your kidneys and your digestive system, they're all working for the same body. They're all connected. They affect each other. They're interrelated in very multifarious and intimate ways. And you can't just isolate what the heart does from what the lungs do, or what the liver and the kidneys and so on do, with the blood, what's in the blood. So it might be well intentioned. I'm sure that there's no Buddhist teachers teaching in order to increase suffering, but I would say, to be honest, it's a radical misunderstanding, and it's not a very helpful instruction. So when we talk about being the observer or just watching or reflecting, this is the way it is, that's not switching off our responsivity, because you can just watch yourself taking action. Our ability to choose and act and take initiative is part of the way things are. That's not an intrusion on the way things are. Like in T.S. Eliot's poem, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, he said, do I dare disturb the universe? I would say, well, you are the universe, Mr. Eliot. That we are part of that. There's an intrinsic connection. So I wouldn't want that sense of it is what it is to be read as a don't do anything. And if what is useful to do is to bring up your MP, or to get out the masks and distribute them, or to go visit your friends and start encouraging the acceptance of the vaccine, or using the masks, or lobbying the government to be more proactive, that's part of the way things are. That's not a departure from being unattached. I would say that's an unentangled participating, I would talk about, that use that kind of terminology, so that you are recognizing the participation of this being with the rest of the living system, the physical universe, but that participation is without entanglement, is without delusion or attachment. So that's one of my favorite terms, unentangled participating. It's a little bit of a clumsy terminology. You could also call it a hands-on letting go. That's another way of referring to it. Hands-on letting go. But I feel it's important to see how we're not, say, just as you can be totally aware of thought, just like thinking is not an intrusion upon our peace, just as sound or light or sensation is not an intrinsic disturbance or an intrusion upon our peace. Otherwise, an enlightened being couldn't see or hear or feel or smell or taste or touch or think. The Buddha couldn't have spoken if thought was an intrusion upon nibbana, upon peace, right? A totally enlightened being, if all thinking and activity was an intrusion upon peace, how could the Buddha have done anything? How could he have spoken? How could he have created this incredible array of teachings? So in terms of the other aspects of that question from our friend in India, I'm sure who's asking this, there is a lot of despair. I know for our friends in the USA, similarly with the previous administration, the current administration seems to be going gangbusters, as they say over there, to get the vaccines available and to carry out protective measures for the country. But the previous administration was extraordinarily tardy and incompetent, and set things up in a very unhelpful and inefficient ways, in my not very humble opinion. Expecting each of the states to run their own programs and make their own choices rather than having a nationally coordinated system was just kind of mind-boggling to me. I'm not involved in politics, but just on a humanitarian and practical level, on just my experience of running a monastery, no, you have to, there are certain things you've got to coordinate from the center, otherwise you get a schlamazel, as they say. So seeing incompetence in government, unfortunately, is not a rare experience, and so real people are dying and suffering on account of that. That is indeed a tragedy. But in terms of how to work with that in one's own mind, I think there's an internal and an aspect and an external aspect. So firstly, I would say don't be afraid of taking action and doing what you can to motivate things to be done in more helpful, more effective, more benevolent ways. But internally, rather than in a sense trying to have loving kindness for what's happening, I would say the kind of loving kindness that we need is, here it is, here's this feeling of resentment and despair at the incompetence of the authorities, or the kind of the helplessness that I feel. To be accepting of that feeling of helplessness, not saying that you like it or that it's good, but here it is. So that receptive aspect of loving kindness is, in this moment, it feels exactly this way. And again, that doesn't mean to say not taking action on the basis of that, but rather, instead of I'm feeling angry and despairing and resentful and hopeless in different measures, and I don't want to feel that. I want to feel competent and compassionate and effective. But in a sense, it's more helpful to, rather than feeling you got to climb over those negative and obstructive feelings to get to the wholesome and helpful attitudes on the other side, it's more helpful to be with fully conscious of, here's the sense of helplessness, of despair, of resentment, of anger, and here it is, and it feels this way. So rather than trying to climb over the negative, painful feeling to get to the pleasant and wholesome and noble feeling, the skillful thing to do, I would say, is to be fully receptive of the painful, messy, uncomfortable, and unwanted states. And this is a teaching Ajahn Sumedho would give over and over and over again, and I found extraordinarily helpful, because we can be quite idealistic. I shouldn't be feeling this resentful, angry state, wanting to bash this politician over the head with a big stick. I shouldn't be feeling that. I should have compassion and kindness, and so you're trying to, so in a way you're suppressing or pushing away. There's a vibhava tanha, the pushing away or the annihilation of that negative, destructive, violent, kind of un-Buddhist feeling, trying to get to the Buddhist sort of compassion and kindness on the other side. But really, and it took me quite a time to get a sense for this, but back in the late 80s, early 90s, Ajahn Sumedho was talking about this a lot. That was in the mid 80s in particular, was the era of what they called it's the arms race, mutually assured destruction, the MAD program, the arms race between the USA and the Soviet Union in the mid 80s, with Western Europe as the battleground. Thank you very much. There was a lot of tension and agitation, a lot of anger towards politicians in the air. The protests at Greenham Common, maybe a number of you are involved with that, with women camping outside the gates of this American missile base based in the UK, in Greenham Common. And so there was a lot of agitation and anger and aversion towards politicians. So in that era, Ajahn Sumedho was often saying, a good Buddhist isn't trying to climb over their anger and resentment and wanting to smack Margaret Thatcher in the teeth, but rather to know that feeling. This is the feeling of wanting to punch Margaret Thatcher. It feels like this. You're not saying that it's good or noble or you're going to act on it, but that's what this feeling is. Here it is. And so that the loving kindness is accepting what's arising within you. And then what happens is that then that those feelings of violence or resentment or powerlessness or whatever, there's a bit of space around them. They're held in an attitude of understanding, and so then you're not resenting them, you're not pretending that they're good or noble or beautiful, but here they are. That's the texture of this present moment. It's this way. And then through that knowing and appreciation of it, there's a bit of space around it. And because of that space around those feelings, those attitudes, then what can be done in terms of your action, your speech, and your relationships with others, what can be done to help the situation, that's got some capacity to operate. If you're just pushing the negative aside and trying to be this sort of kind, noble, good-hearted person, you're trying to like drive the car from the back seat. It's not going to work. And and I found it took me quite a while, as I said, to get to really appreciate this. But after a time, it made so much sense and was so helpful, so that you're not praising yourself or excusing having angry or violent feelings, or wanting to punch various politicians and power holders, but you're recognizing that's what this feeling is in this moment. It has a cause and it feels this way, and it's an aspect of nature. If it's acted upon, everyone's going to lose. It's going to have painful results. But here it is. It's this way. So that quality of radical acceptance or loving kindness is for those painful, uncomfortable feelings, emotions, and attitudes. And so then it's a remarkable chemistry, a kind of alchemy, whereby then what can be done, which is based on wholesomeness and what is a benefit, then has got a bit of room to operate, I would say. And from my own experience, that's how it works. And sometimes what can arise is, well, yes, there are these feelings, but at the moment, there's absolutely nothing that can be done. Okay, leave it alone. Tomorrow, I'll make some phone calls, or I'll go and set this particular idea in motion. But right now, there's nothing to be done. Let go. And so, whatever is appropriate to the time, the place, the situation, and that was really guided by our intuitive wisdom, that's got some room to operate. So, and with respect to these particular issues in India, I think the using that internal work of being aware of those feelings, like the being exasperated at your neighbor, he won't even wear a face covering. So, this is the my neighbor won't even wear a face covering, and how many times have I told him feeling? That's what this is. Again, you're not promoting passivity, but in this moment there's this feeling. That's what's here. And then in knowing it as a feeling, you're being more spacious around it. And so then that intuitive wisdom, okay, well, I've already spoken to this person 5 times in the last 24 hours. So that just seems to have made them more resentful and more determined not to wear a mask. Okay, duly noted. So what can be done that might help the situation? So you're able to be a bit more creative and reflective and take initiative in different ways. That you're coming from a place of responsivity rather than reactivity. So I'll go on to I hope that's helpful. And I know these are very painful and personal issues, but so I hope some of that is useful for that particular situation. Thank you for the encouraging retreat, which is most helpful. Could you tell us something about the man in the photograph on your wall, please? Yeah, this is a frequent question. I don't have that picture there because it was there before Zoom existed, actually. So it's not there in order to be a background. It's just here's my computer, here's my room, there's the wall. So the photograph is of one of the great Buddhist masters of the current age. He's called Master Shu Yun. He was born in 1839 and he died in 1959 at the age of 120. He made the resolution to be a monk for 100 years and kept his resolution. He was so admired by the people of China as a Buddhist practitioner. He was made the head of all 5 lineages of Buddhist practice in China. And any of you who've ever lived in a Buddhist country, you know how different Buddhist lineages tend to argue with each other or find fault with each other. Being appointed the head of all 5 different lineages is something that is very remarkable. So he was the head of the Chan, the meditation school, the esoteric school, the sutra school, the recitation school, and the 5th one, which I'm forgetting. Anyway, all 5 lineages of Buddhism invited him to be their leader. He was the teacher of one of the most sort of eminent Buddhist teachers in America, Master Shunhua, who established a place called City of 10,000 Buddhas and many other monasteries. And he was a good friend of Ajahn Sumedho. And so Master Shu Yun stayed in China. Master Hua came to the West. He was he still has a number of disciples in China, and so that this picture was actually given to Ajahn Jayasaro when he was teaching in China, and he was invited to one of the monasteries, one of the centers that was being led by a disciple of Master Shu Yun, and he gave him a number of these large black and white pictures. So this picture is from an era where he's, I think, just been in retreat for some time. So he's got his hair has grown out a bit. He's got a straggly beard, so that he would go into retreat for a long, long time. He did actually walk on Tudong. He went on a foot journey to Thailand, and he became well known there because he sat down outside a monastery in Bangkok and didn't move for a week. So that got people's attention. So was sat in samadhi for a week outside a particular temple in Bangkok when he was there in Thailand. He was very much a danger or vilified by the incoming communist regime in 1949. And one of the things he's most well known for is that the Red Guard came to his monastery and beat him unconscious with wooden clubs, and he was very seriously injured, but he recovered from those injuries. And so then the communist army, they found out he was still alive, so they went back and they beat him up again using iron bars and smashed him up, you know, to a great extent. He's had all kinds of broken bones and organ damage and such like, but he still didn't die. I mean, he was unconscious for a long time. And when he regained consciousness, then his disciples, so he was well over 100 years old by that time. He was more than 110 years old, and so he was a very frail old man with all his, you know, his bones broken and organs damaged and injuries. And so his disciples said to him, you know, Shifu, please, yeah, it's very compassionate of you to stay alive for our benefit. You know, we know you know that we love you very much, but please, you're having so much pain, so much say difficulty in recovering from these injuries. You know, please don't stay alive for our sake. And he said, oh, I am deliberately staying alive. I've made a determination not to die from these injuries, but it's not for you, it's for the people who beat me up. If I died, the bad karma they would create is so awful, I couldn't be responsible for that. So I'm staying alive for their benefit. So that's the kind of person that he was. Yes, indeed. So he's on my wall to be a good example, to say that degree of self-sacrifice and kindness is possible for us as human beings. He also bowed all the way across China. He took 6 years going 3 steps and 1 bow all the way to the ground across the whole of China to make merit for his mother and father. That took about 6 years to do, through the the wind and rain and through the mountains. And so, as they say, bones of steel. He was someone who had an extraordinary resolution and faith, but also he was a very gifted meditation teacher. So the last thing I'll say about him is the meditation instructions that Ajahn Sumedho first used as a layman came from a retreat that was led by Master Shu Yun in Shanghai in 1954. So he was 114 when he led that retreat. So any of you are thinking about retirement, he was still running meditation retreats at the age of 114, and the Dhamma talks were recorded and then put into a book. There's, some of you might know the Chan and Zen training by Lu Kuan Yu, Charles Luke as an English name he used, Lu Kuan Yu as his Chinese name, and so when Ajahn Sumedho was in the Peace Corps in the 1950s, then there was very few Buddhist books in English at that time, and a friend of his who was stationed in Hong Kong sent him these Chan and Zen training books by Charles Luke, and they had this the Dhamma talks from this retreat in Shanghai, and in that Master Shu Yun is explaining the investigation of the question, who am I, as a meditation method. And so you can, there's a small version of it. That's a small, an off-print produced by the City of 10,000 Buddhas. Sorry, by the corporate body of the Buddha Educational Foundation. They did an off-print. So that is obtainable probably through Amazon or eBay or somewhere. And so that's the Dhamma talks from that retreat. And so Ajahn Sumedho, that was the first meditation method that he used, was the question, who am I? So he used that while he was a layman in Borneo for a couple of years, and then when he first came to Thailand, and when he went to meet Ajahn Chah, and Ajahn Chah asked him what kind of meditation practice he'd been doing, he said, well, I've been using this method called the Huato, investigating the question, who am I? And he thought Ajahn Chah was going to say, well, then stop doing that. That's really, that's no good. You should do my method instead. But and because in that era, in the 1960s, this was 1967, most meditation monasteries had a particular sort of house style. So that this is, you're in Wat Po, or you're in Wat Saket, or you're in Wat Mahatat, or you're in Wat Umong, and you do the method that's done at that monastery. So Ajahn Sumedho, the young Bhikkhu Sumedho was familiar with that kind of, okay, this, you stay here, you do our method. To his great surprise, Ajahn Chah didn't say that. He said, so what are the results? What's the effect or the benefit of that? And he had an English translator, or someone who could translate into English, and he said, well, I find it very, very helpful because of this, because of that. And Ajahn Chah, to his great surprise, said, okay, just carry on doing that. And a few years later, a while later, when Ajahn Sumedho was well settled into Wat Pah Pong, he asked Ajahn Chah, when I described that method of using the question, who am I, had you ever heard of that as a meditation before? And he said, no. And he said, oh, well, so and you were quite okay with me doing that? I said, yeah. And he said, well, I realized that most of what you were going to learn from Wat Pah Pong was living with the other monks and training in the forest and being eaten by mosquitoes and dealing with all of the, hunger and heat and living with the wild animals and other people. So, the meditation methods are really just a small adjunct to the whole training. So Ajahn Sumedho has a connection not just with Master Hua, Master Shu Yun's chief disciple, who was his Dharma heir of Master Shu Yun, but also through that connection through the Charles Luke books of Chan and Zen training. As I said, I'm not very good at short answers, but I'll continue. So the next one is also about who's in the portrait on the wall behind you. Share thoughts on the invisibility of women in the Buddhist tradition. Love that articulation of samadhi. He is pointing towards, can he include more on that process? Is there a book reference? Taste of Freedom. So there's a few things there. I already talked about the portrait. Share thoughts on the invisibility of women in the Buddhist tradition. Well, there's a lot of very non-invisible women on my screen here. The nuns that I live with here at Amaravati are decidedly non-invisible. I think this is probably referring more historically or around the world. I think that women in the Buddhist world are becoming a bit more visible, more active. I think because of its roots in Asia and the general sort of patriarchal nature of societies in the world, and particularly in the East, but in the West as well, then women have generally been pushed into a more invisible or quiet or less prominent or leading positions. And what we have inherited has been a result of 25 centuries, 2,500 years of those sort of cultural forms. I don't say that's a good thing. I'm going to just say, I would say that the Buddha Dhamma has spread into various cultures, and it has a certain amount of effect on the cultures that it goes to, but it doesn't completely establish the form of the culture, so that in Thailand you get Thai Buddhism, in Sri Lanka you have Sri Lankan Buddhism, in China you have Chinese Buddhism, in Japan you have Japanese Buddhism, in Mongolia you have Mongolian Buddhism. That the Dhamma moves into the societal forms and informs the culture and society that it goes to, but there isn't any such thing as a sort of Buddhist country, really. I would say that it can influence that, but it doesn't really form the whole of a particular culture, in my experience or to my knowledge. So I feel that that women are becoming more visible and more active and more, say, respected in the global field of Buddhist practice. You have people like Annie Tenzin Palmo, Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo, the British nun living in India, Sultan Alione. When people ask me, when I was living in the States, they say, who do you recommend as Buddhist teachers? Who do you admire or who do you look up to as Buddhist teachers in America? I said, I'll be fairly candid here. I see, well, there's only two that I would really recommend, and both of them are women. And well, one was Ruth Denison, who passed away a little while ago, a number of years ago, and then Jan Chozen Bays up in Oregon. So they say, what about the men? And I said, well, he asked me who I would recommend as really accomplished teachers. So I'm happy to name those names. I said, really, if you want to know the ones that I really look up to, I would go to or listen to for teachings. Then Ruth Denison and Chozen Bays. And I would also add, in Canada, Aya Maidanandi is a very wise and excellent teacher, lives in the Ottawa area. And so I'm not trying to be too partial or just bias things, but seriously, when people have asked, when I lived in America, I moved back to England 10 years ago, but when I was living there and people would ask, who do you recommend as teachers in America? That's who I would say, Ruth Denison and Chozen Bays. So, and I feel that the fact that they can have a respected position in the Buddhist field and have a voice and be influential, and that to be a normal and kind of unremarkable thing, I feel is a very healthy sign. Also, I mentioned nowadays Tara Brach is being more well known and much appreciated as a teacher. I co-led a thing with her a few weeks ago, and she's someone that I've also known over time, and I would also say is a very significant voice in the Buddhist world. So I think that you have an ongoing dialogue of culture and spiritual practice, and any place that the Dhamma goes to, it can inform the culture, how it'll take shape in the West, here in the UK, or other countries in Ireland, or around Europe and America, or around the world. Who knows? But personally, I'm doing my best to help the women that I'm in contact with, or I have any kind of influence on, to be given a substantial voice, and so that the senior nuns who live here, Ajahn Chandasiri has been here for some time, Ajahn Sundara in particular, are very active as teachers, and so that I'm fully supportive in them being able to be available and to share what they can to be a helpful influence in an absolutely equal way with the other male teachers here. So I would I feel I do what I can to help that the balance to be redressed, but I think we have to think in centuries rather than even than decades. Those of you who want things to change more rapidly, then I feel it's understandable wanting things to be more equal and balanced, but culture changes very, very slowly. And so I think at least decades, if not centuries, which might be really exasperating and disappointing for you to hear me say that. But if you look at the historical process, the things move slowly in terms of cultural change. It's not just 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. It's really long periods of time for something to really shift and change its character, like one of those gigantic cargo boats that take 5 miles to turn a corner. That our cultures sometimes are so unwieldy. It really does take decades and decades, centuries to really make a shift. So I'm not a cultural historian. I'm just sort of speaking off the top of my head. But when people ask these kind of questions, then that's how I tend to see it. And I also encourage that like generational thinking, because as with I mean, there's great blessings to the technological revolution. The fact we can have this virtual retreat. We've got people in India, people in Thailand, people in Alberta in Canada, people in California, and all over the planet joined together on our screens. That's amazing. This is miraculous. So that's a great benefit to the technological revolution. But the downside of it is that our attention span gets shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, and our sense of patience and working with living systems is more and more tested, because things if we get used to things being sort of immediate, you can see something, want something, buy something, just see it, want it, buy it. How long does it take to click on click the shopping cart button? It's very fast. But natural processes and cultural changes, they don't move at that kind of speed. And that I feel, particularly for younger people, that a lack of patience and the kind of the effects of the speed of stimulation that comes from having smartphones and social networking and kind of constant sort of internet connection. It feeds the qualities of impatience and restlessness, and I'm not trying to justify slow changes. What I'm saying is that because of being habituated to having rapid, colorful interesting change available at a click, then that makes us much more bored, much more restless, much more easily. And to be able to be at ease with slow changes, the changing of a season, the changing of a day into night, we're much less equipped for that nowadays. So I feel that one of the things that I encourage in many different areas is to think generationally, like in Native American philosophy and thinking. They would talk about you don't work for yourself, you work for the seventh generation, and I feel that's very skillful. It's not just for sort of me today, but what's the seventh generation? So I'm 64 years old now, so I'm working to help Amaravati to develop, but it's not for me, it's for the 7 generations that come after this time. So that's very unusual. It's kind of very unmodern thinking, I would say. But I feel it's helpful and skillful, and that the more we can think generationally, and again, it's not just in schools or information technology, it's also within the political sphere. Most politicians are not working for the 7th generation or even the next generation. They're just working to get re-elected. So it's like a 2-year cycle, almost, or maybe 4 years for the presidential or prime ministerial elections. But people working to the next election rather than putting an unpopular law forward, knowing that in 20, 30, 40 years time, people are going to benefit. So it's like one of our supporters, his family helped to build the M1, and he was saying when the company took on that task, they said, well, we can do it through method A, that'll be cheaper, but it won't last as long. We can do it method B, it'll be 30% more expensive, but it'll last a lot longer, and you'll have less potholes and less maintenance will be needed. And so the government at the time said, let's go with method A. So the M1, which is the main north-south motorway here in the UK, between London and York, London and Leeds, excuse me, there's a lot of repairs. But it was a short-term thinking of the government of that era that said, let's just go the cheap way. So I feel that even though it might be unpopular thinking, that to be cultivating that sort of generational perception that we're not just working for our own lives and the things closest to us, but literally 7 generations ahead, and that I feel is far more in tune with how life works. So it's not just with the issue of the visibility of women, but in many, many, many dimensions of our lives. Somehow it's gone around to 4:29 already, but I'll try to maybe respond to one more. Let's see. Question: when undertaking big changes in one's life, part of oneself is in accord and has pressed for such change over a long period. However, major attachment to status quo and great fear of the unknown, leading to intense mental struggle and stress when steps taken. Tips on how to proceed, please. I think the short answer is be mindful. Again, I'm not very good at short answers, but that's really it. That being, as I was saying about to our friend in India, about dealing with the frustrations and exasperation with the way the pandemic's been handled there, fully acknowledging those, yes, I've taken a lot of initiative, I put a lot of effort into this, yes, I'm feeling attachment to the status quo, yes, I'm afraid of the unknown, here it is, okay? Opening to all of that, attuning to all of that, and I'm not calculating a way forward, but it's rather like if you're playing in an orchestra or you're playing on a sports team, it's not a calculation, it's an attunement. Like any of you who've been in a choir or in an orchestra, you got to follow the leader, keep your eye on the conductor, or you follow the lead voice. that's how you attune. That's how you have a quality of harmony. So it's not a calculation or just making a list of pros and cons. It's a opening the heart, opening the mind, and attuning as fully as possible to the situation, and then recognizing the pleasant, the painful, what you want, what you're afraid of, allowing all of that to be fully conscious, and then letting a way forward take shape out of that. So, you know, if you're playing in an orchestra or you're on a sports field, then those kind of responses, you know, they happen in milliseconds, you know, really fast. And you can be mindful that quickly. But if there is that basis of attunement, if you start to think about it like, what should I do? Yeah, what's the right thing for me to do? Then the thinking mind gets in the way, and then you trip over your own feet, or you hit a dud note. So it's like in those of you who remember Star Wars, the instruction to Luke Skywalker: don't think, use the Force. So it's like, don't calculate your way to the right thing to do, but rather cultivate that quality of mindful attunement to the present situation, and let the intuitive wisdom guide what is said and done with respect to that situation. That, you know, and then what is the so-called right thing? I have a kind of like an ongoing campaign against the idea of the right thing, or it was meant to be, or you know, what we should do, because I would say there is a right thing to do, but it changes millisecond by millisecond. Just like you know, what's the right note to hit in playing in an orchestra, or what's the right thing for a football player to do, or you know, in a rugby game, who's the right person to pass the ball to? It's going to change moment by moment. It's not fixed. And what guides that rightness is attunement. So, and when we use the word samma, like samadhi, right view, and all of the factors of the Eightfold Path, that samma, S-A-M-M-A, that's related to the musical term S-A-M-A, samma, with which is, it sounds very similar, and which means in harmony with. So when we talk about right view, it doesn't just mean sort of right as opposed to wrong. It means attuned view, attuned to the way things are, or right effort which is attuned to what is appropriate to the time, the place, the situation. Right mindfulness is mindfulness that is attuned to the situation. So I feel that's a good way of understanding. And when if we have that idea of there's a right thing for me to do, and I just have to find out what it is, and if I follow that right thing, then magically it will take me to happily ever after. And that, I would say, that's wrong view. That there isn't a fixed right thing that I should be doing, but rather if that's sort of the actuality of what's the appropriate thing to do is changing moment by moment, second by second, and that the only thing that's really reliable is that awake, alert attunement to the time, the place, the situation, and that guides us in the best possible way. I mean, I'm abbot of Amaro Monastery, so this is a place with 60 or 70 people living here. We have a lot of different things going on, including the pandemic. We're rebuilding the whole monastery. We've got a very large-scale building program that we're right in the middle of, and then there's people's minds, their spiritual practice, they're dealing with their meditation, their own ups and downs, and family crises. So even in this little bubble of human activity, there's a lot going on. And so people say, how do you operate as abbot of Amaravati? There's so much to do. And, how do you keep control of it? So I say, well, if you're trying to be in control, then you will suffer badly. If you're a control freak, you will suffer. That's not an abusive term, but if you try to control everything. So this is exactly how I try to fulfill my role as the abbot of this monastery, is to just stay attuned to each situation each day, and to respond from that place of attunement. And that what I can do, I try to do the best I can. What I can't do, I leave alone and don't make anything out of. and don't rely on apparent sort of perceptions of success and failure or praise and criticism, but just being attentive and seeing what works over time and being guided by that. So maybe one more. Elaine, you might see this a request. Perhaps Ajahn Amaro share more of his thoughts on radial acceptance, radical acceptance. Radial acceptance, that's quite good. Huh? I might use that in future. Radial acceptance. All-encompassing, all-around acceptance. Well, I think I've spoken to that already. So that's I would say that's the receptive aspect of metta, of loving kindness, is that radical acceptance, that recognition that everything belongs. So along with the wholesome and noble qualities such as unselfishness and compassion, wisdom, awareness, and generosity, then also violence, selfishness, jealousy, greed, laziness, resentment, they also belong, and everything in between. They're part of the natural order. But you're also recognizing as part of that there are effects that come from those attitudes. And so that you can accept to accept something doesn't mean that you approve it. And again, this is something Ajahn Sumedho underscored over and over and over again when he was teaching in the 80s and 90s. To accept something doesn't mean that you approve of something. So you can accept a violent thought towards a politician. Doesn't mean to say you approve it or you're going to act on it, but here it is. So acceptance does not imply approval, but so that you can accept a violent urge has just arisen in the heart. You can know it as a violent urge, but you're seeing, well, if that's acted on, then that it'll be painful for that person, it'll be painful for this person, everybody loses. So that can be known, can be felt, and can be let go of and not acted on. So radical acceptance doesn't mean that you act on something. So you might have a jealous feeling or a lazy feeling or an angry feeling, a destructive feeling. You don't have to suppress it, but you're just choosing, like I was giving that example about coming to the crossroads. You don't want to go to Leighton Buzzard, you want to go to Hemel Hempstead. So when you get to the crossroads from Great Gadsden, turn right. You don't have to resent the road to Leighton Buzzard or hate it. That north is not evil. It's just you don't want to go that way. So when you get to the crossroads, go right, and that'll take you to Hemel Hempstead. And so in exactly that way, okay, this is a violent impulse, a jealous impulse, a lazy impulse, an anxious impulse. Yeah, if that's followed, it'll take me to a place where I don't want to go. So you politely don't go that way. You don't have to hate it or fear it or resent it. Yes, that's part of violence is part of nature. Selfishness and greed are part of nature. If they're followed, then painful consequences ensue. And compassion and kindness and generosity, unselfishness, honesty are part of nature. If they're followed, then beneficial, pleasant results follow. So, okay, that's the direction to turn in if you want what is pleasant, harmonious, and beneficial to be the result. So I will leave things there. It's just about 22 the hour now, so we can sit quietly for 15 minutes. There's been a lot of words put into the air, or at least through the microphones and into the airs wherever you are. There's sort of international sharing of air in India and Thailand and Ireland and the UK and Germany and Alberta and California and everywhere in between. So we can sit quietly and just let all those words reverberate, resonate, and then at about 5:02 we'll have a little closing sharing of blessings for our weekend. like to close our session with offering the sharing of blessings. So offering up whatever good karma we've created amongst us as a collective, including all the animals who've been joining in. I see a few cats and dogs have been participating over the weekend. I saw Lorraine's little black and white cat popping into the picture there a moment ago, and I think Barbara has got a black dog just down by her cushion there. So and there was a Phil and Fiona and Jason seemed to have a pooch that was wandering in and out of the picture, enjoying the vibes of the weekend. So sharing our blessings with all beings amongst our group. Also, particularly around the world, specifically the people of India at this time feel things are extraordinarily distressing and difficult for the community in India right now. So to take this up as an opportunity to consciously share whatever goodness has come from our time together with all those suffering from the pandemic, and all the also those caring for them, the nurses, doctors, care providers of many kinds, and the bereaved families, of course. So please take this as an opportunity to send forth your good wishes and consciously share the goodness of your life with all these beings. So I'll just chant on my own, and you can join in with your microphones off if you wish to, if you know the words. If you have a chanting book there, it's on page 33 of our Amaravati chanting book. Now let us chant the verses of sharing and aspiration. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, and through this act of sharing, may all desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until I realize Nibbana in every kind of birth. May I have an upright mind, with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge, unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble guide. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and illusion be dispelled. So I would like to express my thanks to Elaine and to Michael O'Brien and to Paul and Ivan and the team at Sunyata, virtually hosting virtually.
Yeah.
This event. Without them, this would not be possible. So, Anumodana, Sadhu, thank you for your good efforts in helping to bring together this small but global community for this weekend, and hopefully the time we've shared together and the opportunity to practice Dhamma and to reflect upon the teachings is something that will continue to ripple through our lives, and please take what is good and let that inform your attitudes, your actions, and your words. So, go well.